Benvenuti.
Welcome.
Sono lieto di accogliervi alla
I'm very happy to welcome you to the Church San Giuseppe dei Falegnami, which has finally reopened.
2 anni fa.
2 years ago, in August 2018, a loud bang took place, and at 2:59, the roof fell in, leaving a hole. We could see the sky, and the church was left in appalling ruins.
Una rovina che veramente era sconfortante.
Today, after 2 years, we can finally see the church in its splendor, after a restoration that was very accurate, very quick, and which was carefully followed with great competence by many technicians.
Tecnici che si sono avvicendati. Bene, a questo punto non vi resta che
Very well.
entrare e vedere voi
Now,
stessi il risultato
come in,
di questo.
have a look at the wonderful result of this work.
So welcome back to the first day of the Restoration Week 2020. We are today in San Giuseppe dei Falegnami. Thank you very much to the Bishop, Monsignor Libanori, della Diocesi di Roma, to introducing us to his house, which have been restored, or it's under the restoration right now. Just a technical issue. I am, as yesterday, without the mask because we are keeping the social distance on the stage, as you can see. So in the room, people are all with the mask because the COVID restrictions are still working at the moment. So, today we are talking about, again, restituzione, to give back something to someone, and in that case we are giving back in a very short period one of the most important churches we have in Rome, which had a huge accident less than 2 years ago. There have been a collapse. We are talking with the professors, designers, and companies cooperating in the restoration of this church today. I am glad to have with us Roberto Lovato, direttore partenariato industriale e rapporti con organizzazioni, con organismi internazionali dell'Istituto del Commercio Estero, Italian Trade Agency. Roberto, accomodati. We are at the first day, the first episode of this Restoration Week 2020, the first digital edition. It was a challenge. We accepted a challenge, and I hope that we are succeeding. It is early to make a balance because tomorrow we have the final international conference. But as a matter of fact, all the Italian institutions related to restoration, the Ministry of Culture, the university, the private sector, the association have cooperating in realizing this wonderful first 4 days. So just a greeting and a welcome and a comment.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. I am, thank you to all, and I'm very pleased to bring the greetings of Italian Trade Agency for your presence, both here in presence or remotely at today's visit, and those that took place in the last few days as part of Restoration Week. I hope that the various appointments have been a source of interest for all of you and your activities, and from now on, we are also, I mean our office, me personally and my colleague in Rome, but also our office abroad, are in all over the world, are at your disposal in order to develop further collaboration with Italian companies in the sector of restoration. Thank you again. For the organization of this cycle of events, I would like, first of all, to thank Asso Restauro, which shared the organizational efforts with us, and not least the Ministry of Cultural Heritage, with through the superintendencies made it possible to visit the historical sites location. And the Lazio region and the Superintendency of Lazio for Cultural Heritage, the University of Rome, La Sapienza, and Roma Tre present here today, the Archbishopric of Rome, and the local administration that have contributed in making all this possible. A warm thank you to all these institutions and those who, with their presence here or remotely, have shown interest in our proposal and laid the foundation for further future collaboration. I don't want still any more time. I simply want to wish everyone success in their activities, and invite everyone to visit Italy and its cultural heritage, hoping that the conditions will soon be created to do so in complete freedom and safety. Thank you very much again.
Grazie Roberto. It is important. All this week is due to the support and the organization of the Italian Trade Agency. Tomorrow we are going to meet at the ministry, at the headquarters in Rome of the Italian Trade Agency, together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Agency for the Development to the Cooperation, and all our partners present and connected online. Back to Chiesa dei Falegnami, San Giuseppe dei Falegnami. A couple of years ago, less than a couple of years ago, in a terrible instant, like in an earthquake, long as a life, this church have been affected by a huge collapse. This morning we were here with Alessandro Bozzetti and Don Pierluigi Stolfi to discuss briefly what happened and what happened during these first 2 years of reconstruction.
Okay, I'm here with Don Pierluigi Stolfi and Alessandro Bozzetti. Thank you, Andrea. Good morning to everybody. We're here in the oratorium of the Church of San Giuseppe dei Falegnami, together with Don Luigi Stolfi, the commissioner of the Arciconfraternita dei Falegnami. Now, we're very happy, we're very glad to host the ICE and Asso Restauri to show and to allow you to visit the site that underwent this reconstruction, this restoration that is undoubtedly very interesting. Now, as you have seen, on the 30th of August 2018, at 14:59 minutes and 23 seconds, a great part of the ceiling of the church collapsed, and also the coffered ceiling fell with it. with a gold leaf, which is very precious indeed. So Don Luigi Stolfi provided help to the firemen by providing them with all of the means that were required to actually secure the area. And that process finished on the 6th of December, and the church was then handed back to the Arciconfraternita. And then at that point, we completed the securing of the area. So we were able to secure it, and the road leading to the capital was reopened, thus allowing access also to the building where the mayor is. And then there were a whole set of activities that were carried out by the prosecutor. Of course, we cannot say anything about the investigations because the investigation is still ongoing, and we are kept to secrecy. We can only say that there has been some impact caused by the weather and by some microorganism which brought to a weakening of the structures, which then collapsed. Now, the site was born on June of the following year, because in March 2019, the prosecutor actually opened up, released from seizure, the area. The Vicariato thus had already prepared the project. We received the green light from the authorities, and on the 3rd of June, after a public tender, 2 companies were selected, and the works were finally started. And then on the 30th of August 2019, a special celebration was held to actually celebrate this fact. And at this point, technicians, but also the public, could visit this area, including also the mayor. And then the reconstruction of the coffer ceiling started. We completed the ceiling, and in March 2020, we were supposed to hold another special celebration with the priest. However, unfortunately, we could not do that due to COVID. That's why we're here with the masks, because, as you all know, there were a whole set of problems caused by the COVID, and we could not do that. So the works carried on up until today. As you can see now, the pavement has been completely restored. The ceiling has been consolidated. For me, this experience was truly wonderful. I thank the Vicariato, Don Luigi Stolfi, and the Arciconfraternita, for having given us this very precious opportunity. The ceiling is wonderful, and this work has involved so many people with great passion. They've worked on Saturday, on Sunday, people from the superintendency, from the ministry, and from so many other areas. So in this site, we could truly experiment and use not only the well-established techniques of restoration that were developed here in Italy, but we were able to pool all resources, all competences, in order to actually reach our common goal, our common objective, an objective that we were able to fully achieve. In fact, this restoration is viewed by many players as an excellency in terms of restoration, and with the view of actually returning the church to the citizenship of Rome. And we're very proud of all of this, of course. So, Alessandro, you talked about passion, and passion is something that undoubtedly has been at the very heart of these days, focused on restoration, because all operators, contractors, and those who are in charge of projects are all, of course, working with great passion, including those who, of course, have to protect our historical heritage. Now, this site was returned to the city. It will be fully returned briefly in a short time. And now, however, we're here to return the site to also the international audience and experts. Returning it is very important. And now, the two aspects that characterize this site is that the interventions were very timely, especially if we consider that the site had to be closed and subject to judicial investigations, and the restoration was carried out, of course, according to all of the principles and all of the requirements with an analysis and a study, and in the end, restitution, the returning it to the community. It was very complex because you had to actually recover so many different pieces of the coffered ceiling, and you had to reposition them in their original position, and of course you also had to distinguish what was original from what was added and to show the difference. So we will talk with Stolfi and Bossetti and the other guests about all of these topics when we will talk about them directly from the site.
Giovanni Carbonara, professore emerito at the University La Sapienza in Rome, and one of the fathers of the Italian theory of conservation. Thank you very much for being here and welcome. During this restoration week, we have been the opportunity to visit several places, but we can say several different models of regeneration or restituzione, as the Italian word that we have used during this week. Amatrice, an immediate destruction and a reconstruction that have to be defined because it's not clear how and when it will be possible. Colle Maggio, a symbol of the reconstruction of an entire area, the widest restoration work site in Europe, but I think we can say in the world. Santo Stefano in Sessanio, conservazione, we have to tell it in Italian, but the minimal intervention have been the secret to reinvent and recreate the image of a place. Palazzo Rivaldi, complexity was the word that we have used, and complexity is the base of his vocation as a training and education work site. Professor, is it possible to find a common rule, a common path among them?
You mentioned the theory underlying restoration, which should be the vision that guides cases that are very different from one another, like the ones you've mentioned, but which have a common trait, a fil rouge. That is to say, in the restoration approach, this exists, whereas in practice, we see some differences. If we compare the situation of Amatrice and then Colle Maggio and hopefully Palazzo Rivaldi, then we see that outcomes can be different. But these depend on the practical choices that we make. But there's a common trait. That is to say, these are all cultural heritage which have to be kept in their intangible aspect. So we'll have different opportunities, I'm sure. So yesterday we were talking about Palazzo Rivaldi, which is an extraordinary case of restoration that may encompass best practices in this field through a strong interdisciplinary collaboration. And the same goes for the restoration of this church, which has this particular characteristic. That is to say, the restoration was debated and approached with an interdisciplinary approach, besides the administrative framework underlying the recovery. And I'd like to show some images to you. Let us start Here you see the collapse that Mr. Bozzetti will show to you. The sudden collapse of a part of the ceiling that caused several problems. So the collapse and the water falling that could continue to damage, and the need to immediately protect the building, and the need to understand why the roof had collapsed, and then all of the subsequent issues like how to reinforce the structure of the building, and then how to reconstruct the ceiling, and all of the related details. So everything was approached in a coordinated way. So there were contributions by engineers and the Ministry of Cultural Heritage, and the utmost attention by the church in solving the administrative problems. And the result is very interesting. In these images, you may see on the one side, on the left-hand side, the portion which collapsed, 2/3 of the ceiling. And then if you look at the bottom, then you see that this area, which was a prison, and it appears that St. Peter and St. Paul were imprisoned here. So full of history. And this is a 17th century building, which was then renovated in the 19th century. So for this reason, there were many restoration issues that were brilliantly solved. So this is the decorated ceiling that has been restored, and which has been damaged. So wonderful ceiling that was studied in detail, piece by piece. So there was a face of deep knowledge of each single piece. So let's go back to my initial words. What is the common trait? What is the fil rouge? You need to study, you need to understand, both on the basis of the documentation you have and the direct observation. Fortunately, a survey had been carried out just before the collapse, so it was possible to consider also the techniques, and also, well, we know that each case is different from the others, but it's important to have a broad knowledge. So this is something that Mr. Bozzetti is going to mention in detail. But in order to succeed in defining the causes and eventual responsibility of this collapse, well, some studies were carried out. And I was mentioning the guiding elements for the restoration. So several fundamental concepts have emerged that were also mentioned before. That is to say, the reversibility, intervention, compatibility, and the authenticity of expression. You don't have to create any fakes. You have to allow the monument to tell its own history, which is embodied in its materials. So in this case, we have a clear example of basic intervention. This concept is sometimes misunderstood because it appears that you want to do a limited amount of things, and sometimes people think, you want to do little things and you don't want to do too much. No, the truth is the opposite, because for this reason, we wanted to keep, for instance, the old trusses, and we improved the entire system of trusses with that specific portion that allows the system to be sound. And this can also be reversible. Then there is the issue of execution. And in this case, two main companies worked. That is to say, one a building restoration and the other one dealing with the restoration of the works of art. And I had the chance to visit the site on several occasions, and I saw that they were keeping the ancient pieces, and they were also acting carefully. They were removing the trusses and the main structural items with a great deal of attention. So the restoration is a theory that translates into a good practice. That is to say, based on a project, on a plan, but also during the construction phase. There's Marta Nussbaum, which is a US philosopher, and Dario Antisari, which is an Italian philosopher, who say that nothing is better than good theory. Because sometimes theory is considered as just words, and the practice is something different. Whereas a good idea guides a good implementation. And this is the reason why preliminary ideas allow to have good practical results. And after 1 year, the church was covered, and it was possible to, for instance, organize a religious ceremony. And then after 2 years, the restoration is almost over, which is rare, I have to say. And the respect for these stratifications. But this is part of this criteria that the modern restoration has somehow encompassed. For instance, if you look at this image, that is to say, above the golden framework, there are the traces of a previously existing window. Then a previous phase of the church, that is to say, at the end of the 16th century, that was then changed at the end of the 17th century. So while solving the problem of the covering and the ceiling and the accessibility, of course, to maintain this area and the climate control between the ceiling and the roof, then it was also possible to take into account the need to leave the traces of history, so stratification. So rarely, but it happens. Architecture was very careful. So the restoration is fundamental, and many things have to be taken into account. So the authenticity, the distinguishing traits which have to be visible. So look at this frame. So on the right-hand side, we have an original part, and the left-hand side is a restoration test. So which is not copying the old one, but it reproposes it through, in this case, a pictorial system, which is not classic one. So it accompanies, but it doesn't create from scratch. So by allowing everyone to clearly identify what is authentic, what is ancient, and what is restored. So by way of conclusion, it's easy to say things sometimes, but it is complex when you have to do things, in particular the reconstruction of the entire structure, for instance, the ceiling. And it's very interesting to see how, for instance, observation showed that this ceiling was a work of art that probably had been modified by several people and during several times. And in fact, the horizontal pieces that had been introduced had been somehow moved in order to make them visible from the ground. But what is the effect that you get when you access this church? Well, of course, the new part is the one that is more easily seen. So during the restoration, the new part that is more visible at the center, and then the original pieces were put back in their positions, and then all of the damaged portions were, let's say, put back. But what matters is that at first sight you have a complete reconstruction of this image, and also in consideration of some interventions we made. So each single item, each single element was catalogued and kept, and whenever possible it was put back on its place, and the original pieces were put at the center of the image, so that it was important to show the ancient part. But these wooden pieces were not cut. Actually, based on the studies we made, we could somehow, like a surgeon, we were putting together the ancient and the new parts. So this is the very last image I'd like to show to you. And finally, the colors, because the colors had been changed at the end of the 19th century, maybe darker. So alteration, but not a change of identity, because the church had somehow taken on this 19th century aspect, which was confirmed during the restoration phase. Thank you.
Perfetto, chiarissimo. Grazie mille. Thank you very much. It is always a pleasure to listen you lecture. It is an important introduction of today, because theory of restoration, of course, have to guide our approach choices, and the final intervention. Alessandro Bozzetti, today we are talking to you as an engineer, as you are dressing the suit of your own company, Studio Croci, but you're still the president of Asso Restauro, my president. In Asso Restauro, we are always emphasizing the need of two main aspects in the restoration field: multidisciplinarity and specialization. You are leading a group of multiple professionals, professors, and experts in the reconstruction and regeneration of the church, and you are leading them as an engineer specialized in the restoration of cultural heritage and in historical building. In that case, structure has a priority in the reconstruction, but of course, decoration, restoration are part of the process. Alessandro.
Thank you, Andrea, and welcome back to all of you. So, as you said, and as Professor said, the beauty of this site is the multidisciplinary approach. Many things have been said already, so I would like to make some considerations. In these images, we have 2/3 of the roof which collapsed on the floor of the church and which also partly caused the collapse of the area in which we are today, of the ground. And of course, this disaster is clear. So as Professor Carbonara said, during the first phases of works were aimed to preserve the materials and also with some provisional covering with pipes and joints, and also with some shields that we have put on the roof, also because there were a number of investigations ongoing in order to understand the causes of this disaster, of this collapse, and eventual persons in charge and responsible for it. Actually, there is still a judicial proceeding which is ongoing, so we are telling nothing about that, and also we're telling nothing about the conclusions that were somehow reached. We can only say that the causes are neither due to too aging and due to, for instance, rain or attacked by microorganisms that had eaten, let's say, the essence of the wood, and therefore it could not hold the roof any longer. So these are the images that show the activities carried out during the works. Also because during the investigations we were asked to keep all of the wooden structures in their position after the collapse. In fact, we kept, for instance, as you can see from these images, all of the objects as they were. And also, now there is an image which shows the way in which we worked. We were all at the site, and these are some sketches made in order to explain and understand how to proceed. And also by lifting the bearing structures, the wooden ones, by removing the rest of the materials. And then to come to the configuration that Professor Carbonara showed, that is to say, of the whole free from the entire portions of the coffered ceiling, and also of all of the remains and debris that were on the floor. So the things you see in orange are some wooden items included, and they were orange colored because they had to be visible. And this allowed the magistracy to take pictures and to make scanner laser pictures and to deepen the knowledge on the main and root causes of the collapse. So the entire planning of the activities and the design, although the site had not been unveiled, we were already thinking about how to construct. And as said before, the work started on the 3rd of June, and in August we had completed the roof already. So here it shows how we conceived the ceiling and the covering. There were 3 main fixed parts and 2 central ones with some covering that could be moved. So there was a pre-assembled truss that was put in place by only removing the main flap. And then some specific activities, like, for instance, the basis of the truss. And then we're going to show a video that shows the inclusion of some items, for instance, that increases the basis of the truss, thence reducing the area in which it was possible to work. And also, and this is the item that I was mentioning that didn't exist before and which I'm mentioning now, and below which, before putting it on the wall, there was this bracket, this console that separates the bracket from the wood and preserves the bracket and the entire truss. But the supporting portion was free, like 2 or 3 centimeters of air, that also allow inspection and maintenance whenever needed. So these are some images taken during the execution of works and which tell the accuracy and the ways in which the various activities within the restoration works were carried out. So these images represent an evidence of, for instance, the final layer. So this part, which was before the collapse, was made of bricks and flat bricks, which were replaced by a double cross layer and also by a system of insulation, of thermal insulation, which makes everything lighter and which allows it to be more compact from the anti-seismic standpoint, and this allows a better conservation of the wood. So this is one of the final phases in which we also see the possibility of isolating the area and the waterproofing, and also we also put the tiles on the roof. And in this phase we also installed an environmental monitoring system which monitors temperature and humidity, also because it is necessary to keep on monitoring the situation, and it will help us to understand whether we need to add a system of windows in order to manage humidity and temperature, or if we need, for instance, to add an air conditioning system. The main reason for that is to allow the microclimate under the roof and above the ceiling, to have a temperature that improve the, let's say, the lasting of the entire structure. So you see that 12 months after the collapse, this is how the situation was. So we are fast, when we tell things. But there are 2 websites in which we have detailed information. One is the one of San Giuseppe de Falegnami, and the other one is a magazine that allows you to collect more information in this connection. Thank you. So we saw a time lapse showing the entire reconstruction of the roof, completely on the 30th of August 2018. So the activities started already, and also for the reconstruction of the coffered ceiling, with a series of meetings and debates and sharing of views, and also design in order to make best choices. So this image is a high-definition one that we had, because in 2015 the entire structure had been restored, at least the external part, in order to open the museum, which is close to this place. So luckily we had this high-resolution image and a laser scan of the entire situation. So we had a geometrical basis that was quite reliable. And to it, we added our own surveys. And in fact, here there's a portion of reconstruction which is in beam and which is made through the laser scan. And that was of 2015. And in the background, you see the reconstruction of the lifting system of the coffered ceiling with the two transversal items, that is to say, the main portions of the trusses which have not collapsed. And this reason it was possible to make the 3D projection of the entire structure and to make our checks and assessments. And this is the main structure on which we put the main portion of the coffered ceiling. And all of the surveys were necessary to achieve the necessary, let's say, precision to put 2/3 of the coffered ceiling back and to put each place back to its original position. So in this case, together with Leonardo, and also with the other companies, we decided to make sustainable interventions, and therefore we decided to take these woods from Cadore, where in 2018 there had been a flood. So many trees had been destroyed due to the flood, and we decided to buy the timber from those companies that had those woods. So these are some details that depict the main structure on which we put for instance, the different portions of wood, and then they are decorated, and then the frames were added, as we mentioned before. So this is a significant image, and I hope that the colored green, yellow, and red colors are visible, because this is how we organized the reconstruction, with a matching between these surveys and the images we had from the 2015 surveys and the beam data. So these are, for instance, additional items for the curved portions, which were then molded in order to obtain the right curves and the right shapes, that is to say, the ones of the existing coffered ceiling. So this is an image that we saw before, and in fact, this is the way in which we could, for instance, reach the upper part of the church, and this part was completed before applying all of the frames that we had recovered in the first phases following the collapse, and also the ones that we constructed and developed subsequently. So now I give the floor back to Andrea, and then he decides to whom he wants to give the floor after me.
As we said, we have analyzed causes and effects of the collapsing. Structure are a priority here, but the emotion of a house is given by mainly its skin, the decoration, the aesthetics. So restoration together with the structure restoration is a very important part. Paolo Scarpitti, Special Superintendency of Rome, have dealt as a designer for the restoration of the surfaces. Thank you, Paolo.
Grazie.
Thank you.
L'intervento del Ministero dei Beni
The
e Attività Culturali e
intervention by
Turismo
the Ministry for Cultural Heritage
ha visto partecipare
involved the Superintendency of Fine Arts and Landscape of Rome and also the Central Restoration Institute for the technical support and the consulting for both the restoration of the coffered ceiling and for the recovery of the debris. So we may see that the ministry was involved in all of the disasters that take place in Italy. And in this case in particular, you see, for instance, an image of Amatrice that was taken on the 24th of August 2016, and 2 years later in this church. Similarities are there, but the experiences we gained, especially in the last 3 earthquakes, well, these experiences allowed, for instance, the ministry to improve its skills in terms of cataloging and preservation and contributing then to the restoration of the coffered ceiling in this case of this church. So the first thing that was done was that of dividing the map and the points in which the debris fell in 7 colors. You see the different colors. And at the same time, also to identify the specific items, and each one had been given a name. So, for instance, H1 so H Lacuna, so H1 the Madonna, and H2 Saint Joseph. But each and every single time we were taking debris, then in a one-to-one scale, the single elements and items were, for instance, copied for all of the elements of the coffered ceiling. So drawings were made, and we also used colors in order to help operators while, for instance, identifying the pieces, and we gave names to each single unit. So alpha, beta, just to mention, for instance, the wooden parts, or to mention all the vertical axes. So once the map was drafted, as it happens with earthquakes, the first thing we did was first cleaning of the elements in the apsis of the church, which has been left intact. So that was, in any case, to remove the dust that was there. And in the oratorium close to the church, we arranged a sort of warehouse, like the one that we have arranged in the different Italian cities following earthquakes, like in L'Aquila or in central Italy or in the Emilia-Romagna. So a scaffolding, a warehouse where each single object was kept and numbered, and also further cleaned and de-risked. So, for instance, we were making a sort of clear inventory of all of the pieces, which were measured and then put inside of each single scaffolding. So this is an example of the database that we have developed, also together with Leonardo, that helped us in making this extraordinary intervention. And it was fundamental for us because, as you may see, we have divided, you may read the different, for instance, portions. So you see all of the elements that were included in our inventory. So we knew where each portion was taken, where it belonged, and where it was put. and then also quantified, because we also needed to understand how many pieces needed to be reconstructed versus those that had been recovered. So 8 days after the recovery of the debris, which was completed in 5 days only, that was unbelievable. 9 days later, and this is how the warehouse was, with all of the objects and all of the fragments that have been de-risked and cleaned and also included in the warehouse. Then, together with the Central Restoration Institute, we have seized this opportunity, and in July 2019, we organized a project-related site, that is to say, devoted to identify the intervention techniques and materials in order to carry out the true restoration works. So, in this image, you may see, for instance, the portion of 3 out of 5 students that study within the University of Matera. And in this case, for instance, we see them dealing with a number of restoration testing activities. And we also, for instance, we also adopted the phleboglysis system. So as you may see, for instance, you see Jesus, where we injected a mix of a consolidating product, hence protecting from any biological attack. And this is something we did on several objects. And also, you may clearly see that we have defined the cleaning and consolidation methods, especially in this case for the paintings and the golden painting. And on the right-hand side here, you may see the way in which we have integrated the missing parts. So, for instance, the portions you see there are something like 5 centimeters. And of course, in this case and through these listels, it was possible for us to perfectly reconstruct this portion. And in fact, then it was possible to, for instance, carry out the fine-tuning of each single portion. So the site completed its preliminary activities, and then up to December, and on the occasion of the first part of the university year, and together with the second year students, we have decided to deal with the nativity, that is to say, Madonna and Jesus and Saint Joseph, and we took care of this specific portion, and we have carried out a complete restoration of this object. So these are the hands of the Madonna, which were detached and on the ground, and then, for instance, the hands were broken and the fingers were broken, so the single fingers were identified among the debris that you saw. So this gives you an idea of the care that was paid during the entire restoration process. And on the left-hand side, you see, for instance, the fingers that we could identify through the 3D survey. And at the same time, you also see the draft of reiteration of the listels, as we did with the July activities, and the hand was restored with the reconstruction techniques, and also, for instance, it was possible to treat them in order to keep them in good conditions. And in fact, now we may see also the image on the ceiling. I don't know whether the image is being shown. Okay. So we may see from this image that, okay, if we linger on this image in particular, then we see that, and we will see this better in the next slide, but the hands we saw before and the 2 fingers
non sono state
have
migliorate perché quel legno
not been
è stato completamente ricostruito,
painted,
mentre invece
because
sulla
that part
sinistra, la
was
gamba
entirely
destra, la coscia
reconstructed,
destra della
whereas
Madonna, vedrete
the
c'è una
leg
parte che è
of
stata
the
invece
Madonna
completamente
contains a
reintegrata, e lo
portion
vedremo
which
nello
was
slide tra
completely
poco, alla fine di
reintegrated,
questo
because
filmato,
it has
ed
been
è come è stata
destroyed.
ricostruita
And
e
it was
riproposta con una
reconstructed and
con una tecnica che si chiama
reproposed
puntinato, che è un
with
po'
a
l'equivalente del
technique
tarteggio messo a punto dall'istituto
with a sort of
per
dotted line
appunto
approach.
risarcire le parti di
And
colore
also
mancanti dove
in
questo
order
sia
to
possibile
provide
farlo.
the
Ma se
missing
riprendiamo un
colors.
attimo la
But
visione di
if
questo
we
video, vedete che
look at this
ecco,
video,
da lontano
and
le
then we
dita
see the
che
fingers
sembravano, così si vedeva
that
chiaramente da vicino che erano state rifatte e riproposte, da lontano
had been restored,
questa parte si perde
and from
completamente.
close
Qui siamo
it was
di nuovo
quite
da
visible
vicino.
that they had been restored, whereas if you
Vedete,
look at
si
the image from a
percepisce bene
distance,
la parte
then
rifatta, le parti
well,
ricostruite, ma
it
se si
is
percepiscono da
perfect.
vicino,
So you
dai
perceive
12-13
that,
metri di distanza del pavimento,
of
queste
course,
si mischiano e si
in
fondono
some
perfettamente.
reconstruction has
Qui
been carried
invece, ecco, mi
out, but
fermerei di
then
nuovo
if you look at the
su
image,
questa immagine,
let's say from a
perché
distance of 12
riprendiamo quanto
meters, then
diceva
it is
prima il professor
perfectly
Carbonara.
homogeneous.
E cioè
So we
abbiamo
go back to
deciso
what
col
Mr.
dopo ci
Carbonara said,
domandavamo cosa
because
fare di
we
tutte
were
queste
wondering
cornici
about
che
what to do with
mancavano,
all the
sapevamo che
frames
mancava una
missing,
certa
and we
parte perché
knew
le
that
avevamo
some
calcolate
portions were
all'inizio
missing because we had
e non sapevamo
calculated
bene
them
come
at the
fare alla
beginning
fine. Si è
and we
deciso,
didn't know
abbiamo
what to do
deciso
with
di
that. So we decided
conservare il
to
profilo esatto della
maintain the
muratura,
profile
quindi in
of
questo
the entire
caso
structure.
vedete l'ovolo in
And in
particolare,
fact,
e
you
quindi il
see
profilo lo
this
stesso,
part
quindi la
here.
luce che
So the
batteva sul
profile is
profilo
the same, and the
aiutava la
light
tridimensionalità dell'oggetto, però
on
poi abbiamo
the
deciso di non
profile
di non scavare, di non
was
intagliare, ma di riproporre a
somehow
trompe-l'œil
clear.
l'effetto
So
visivo
we decided to
la
repropose a
parte
sort of
mancante.
trompe-l'œil
E
effect,
quindi
hence reproposing the
andando
missing
avanti,
part.
stiamo in
And
alto, ma
now,
andando avanti nella ripresa, ecco, se ci fermiamo qui,
if
questo è
we
un punto
linger on this
interessantissimo.
portion, well, that's
Questo è un
very
punto veramente
interesting
interessante
because
perché noterete che
you
sotto
will see
quella
that
specie di scatola, quella di
under
sinistra,
the left-hand side
lì c'è un
box,
punto di
there's
interruzione. Quindi a sinistra
a
della
sort of
scatola
break, an interruption.
abbiamo
And
la
in fact,
cornice
we have the
dipinta,
frame, which is
a
painted,
effetto ottico,
and
trompe-l'œil,
it
e a
has a
destra abbiamo
trompe-l'œil
invece
effect. And
l'originale.
on the right-hand
Capite
side, we
bene
have the
che già è
original
quasi
part.
difficile
So it's
riconoscerla da qui, da
difficult
questa immagine così
to
ravvicinata.
identify
Da terra è assolutamente
which
invisibile.
is
Come
the
di nuovo
authentic one, and from the
rispettiamo
ground, it's
completamente la teoria del
definitely
restauro, la
impossible. So we do
riconoscibilità
respect
dell'intervento, non falsifichiamo
the
niente.
restoration. We make no
Da terra
fakes,
tutto
and from the
sembra
ground, everything seems to be
omogeneo e
homogeneous,
coerente,
and
e
everything is
avvicinandosi invece
consistent. But
riusciamo a
then
riconoscere
when you
l'originale
approach the
dalle
object, you
parti
immediately
rifatte.
identify what is the
Andando
original
avanti,
and what is somehow
questo è un esempio,
reconstructed. So this is another example.
possiamo proseguire.
So we may continue there.
Ecco, torniamo adesso un
And
attimo
let us
indietro.
now go
Vedete,
back.
possiamo vedere, se torniamo sulla proiezione delle slide, quello che dicevamo
So
prima.
what we
Quindi,
were
la-
saying before is clearly
vostra
depicted in
sinistra
these
vedete le
slides. On the
condizioni
left-hand side, you
della
see
gamba
the
destra
conditions
della
of the
Madonna,
left
che
leg
vedevamo
of the
prima.
Madonna,
Vedete c'è un
and
strato
in
molto
fact,
scuro
there's
che
a
la
dark
pettorina
layer,
ha emesso, ha messo
which
in
is
molte
something
parti
that was included in several portions
Sotto a
of
questa
the
in
coffered
particolare c'era un
ceiling,
altro strato di
and there was
doratura per arrivare
another
poi a quello
layer
che si
of
vede in fondo, un po' a braso, che è
golden
la
painting,
doratura originale.
and then there was the
Una volta
original,
rimossa la
let's
porfirina
say,
in questo secondo strato, ci
golden
troviamo nella situazione
painting.
di destra, in
So
cui si vedono
after
molto bene questi
removing the
puntini,
additional
che
paintings,
sono
you
appunto
finally see
l'equivalente,
the dots,
non c'è oro,
and
fondamentalmente
there's
è solo
no
un aspetto
gold, it's
cromatico,
just a
ma
chromatic
che a
aspect,
distanza
but
questi puntini
all
miscelati
of
tra di
these
loro
dots
si fondono insieme
mixed
e
to
danno
one
la
another
percezione
give the
dell'oro.
perception and the idea that it's
Questo così a
golden.
titolo di,
So this is just,
potete vedere il San Giuseppe
for instance,
come
you
è
see
arrivato, le
Saint
dita
Joseph and how it
frammentate,
was at
pezzi
the
spezzati, la testa
beginning,
spezzata, una
and
parte
the
del
head
mento
was
spezzato, e
broken,
sulla
and
destra
on the
vedete
right-hand
invece il San
side,
Giuseppe
you see the
completamente
image
restaurato,
as
pronto per essere rimontato.
we
Questo è un ringraziamento
restored it.
mio
So
particolare
this is my
a tutti gli
thanks
studenti, quelli
to
della
all
scuola
the
di Matera,
students from the
quelli
School
della
of
scuola di
Matera,
Roma,
the School of Rome,
e alle
and
colleghe
to the
con cui abbiamo
colleagues
condiviso
with whom we
questa esperienza
shared
straordinaria
this
del
extraordinary
restauro
experience in terms of restoration
della
of
San
this
Giuseppe dei Falegnami,
church,
quindi un ringraziamento
and
a tutti
a
quanti per il
special
loro
thanks
dedizione,
to their devotion and their work. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo, for this overview on the restoration project, for the restoration of the decoration and the decorative asset, the design phases, supported by an accurate analysis, can give a clear view of how to perform the restoration on site. New technologies such as laser scanning, building information modeling, and the new 3D modeling can help to be more accurate in the design phase, to have to avoid as possible surprises on site. And then after the restoration project, someone have to do the job. The Istituto Centrale del Restauro have taken part to the restoration. The private sector also is involved, a private company, Rossana Gabrielli, executive partner of Leonardo, and let me say former president of Asso Restauro and now vice president, will tell us something about the restoration phases. Thank you.
Buonasera a tutti. Vorrei farvi vedere qualche immagine sul lavoro che abbiamo fatto qui alla chiesa di San Giuseppe dei Falegnami. Come vedete, la domanda, diciamo, a cui dovevamo dare una risposta era come riempire questo spazio vuoto. Le indicazioni, le linee guida ci sono state date da
guidelines were provided by Engineer Bozzetti of the Croce Study, by the superintendency represented by Dr. Scarpitti, and we were helped step after step as we were faced with the difficulties that this work entailed. And then the answer came from the data itself. The answer came from a very precise analysis of each given element. Now we took part at the recovery phase of those portions that had fallen from the roof and which we recovered, and that was very, very important, because by so doing we were able to actually better understand what had happened, and therefore we started also thinking about how to better restore the ceiling. As Dr. Scarpitti said, it was very important to analyze, to study the pieces that we recovered, and also the study of the decorated elements of the statues, for example. That too was very important. Now the serial pieces were identified through this analysis of Dr. Scarpitti in various phases. There was a very punctual analysis that was carried out for each element with the laser scanner survey that was carried out some years before. Thanks to that, we were able to measure what was the portion of element that existed and what instead had to be filled in. So we were able to identify the quantity of the serial elements that were recovered, the 49.5%, and that, of course, helped us to decide over how to then reconstruct those elements and integrate them. Now, the work then brought us to a recovery that was even greater. We were able to recover 65% of the original portions in the serial parts. The estimate was initially a little bit lower than it actually turned out to be. Now, as to the sculptures, we were able to recover 90% of the elements. So based on that data, we started the intervention, our reconstruction, and of course the laser scanner was the starting point that you see there on the right, because it was fundamental to obtain all of the information, all of the details, which during the restoration itself proved to be essential to address those questions that I was referring to before. So it was like having a virtual ceiling that we were able to actually use in trying to address the various issues. Then another very important thing was with creation of a prototype, a physical prototype, which we positioned in this environment, in this area, to try to understand what impact the reconstruction hypothesis would have had before the reconstruction itself. So by using, for example, the lights and shadows and the technique of decoration. And then starting from this, we were able to start with the site. There were 4 parallel areas. The first 2 that you see here represented started immediately at the end of June 2019. The first one was the site here in Rome to recover and restore the original portions which had fallen and which, as I explained, had been recovered and catalogued. Then another team of restorers and carpenters worked in Bologna in laboratory to create ex novo some pieces which had to be integrated to the pieces which had been recovered. Then subsequently, starting with the end of August, when we could work directly in situ, we started other 2 parallel phases. Area 3, the restoration 1, with that portion which remained in situ, conserved, and then Area 4, with the reconstruction of that area instead that was missing. Now, as to Area 1, i.e. the restoration site with those elements that had been recovered, Adele Galitte had an intuition. She was one of the technicians who actually acted as an overseer for this site. So she created a one-to-one based on the laser scanner in order to reconstruct, much like a puzzle, the decorations which we were then supposed to recreate.
E ricostruire, diciamo, la parte mancante.
Since they were missing. So as you can see, the portions which we had to put together, the fragments were sometimes very small, and therefore the work was very difficult. We had to be very careful to try to recover and consider each single piece, and of course we had to position them as closely as possible, and fit them as closely as possible in the original place. A detailed analysis of these pieces told us that some, for example, had to be placed in specific positions. Their sizes, in fact, were such that they had, that when you looked at them from below, it appeared that they were somehow moving. So it was very important to reconstruct things as we did. Then the area 2 in Bologna, in the city of Bologna, was coordinated by a team of restorers which kept into continuous contact with the restorers from Rome. Because in fact it was very important for them to receive the right information in order to then create a decoration that was in line and which responded to the needs and which then could be repositioned in situ. Then this was the area that started at the end of August, the restoration and recovery of the portions that remained in situ. And this was fundamental because it allowed us to better understand both the structural part and also the decorative one. It allowed us to understand truly how the ceiling had been made. And so we were able to study the restoration, we were able to study the decorations and their state of conservation, and furthermore we were able to
ricostruzione
obtain
della parte mancante.
information which was useful to reconstruct the
Abbiamo
parts that were
consolidato
missing.
ovviamente
We
questa
consolidated
parte
this
anche nella
part,
parte strutturale,
the structural
utilizzando
one as
anche
well,
materiali che
by
sono
using
stati
material
presi nella
which
fase di recupero,
we
diciamo, delle
had
porzioni
recovered previously during the recovery phase.
La realizzazione
Now,
della
finally,
ricostruzione della porzione
the
mancante.
reconstruction of
Queste che
the
vedete sono
missing
immagini della
portion.
ricostruzione
Now,
della
these
parte
are images
strutturale,
of the
che vi ha già
reconstruction of the
spiegato
structural
Engineer
part that
Bozzetti,
the engineer
e
Bozzetti
questo
already talked
invece
about
è
before.
l'inizio
This
della
instead is the
ricostruzione delle
reconstruction
porzioni
of the
decorate.
decorative parts.
Avete già avuto indicazione su come si è proceduto,
Now,
quindi integrando porzioni
we
originali
integrated the
con
original
porzioni
portions with the
realizzate ex
portions
novo
which were created ex
con
novo.
un lavoro costante e
And
continuo tra
of course,
falegnami, restauratori e
there was
decoratori
teamwork
per
between
giungere
the
al miglior
carpenters, the
risultato
decorators, and
possibile. Questa è
restorers.
una
They
fase
continuously
anche
work
di
together to try to
ricollocazione
obtain
in
the best
situ
result.
degli elementi
And
scultorei
this is
e,
recollocation in situ
anche
of
in
the
questa fase è
sculptorial
stato molto
elements.
importante
And in this phase too,
utilizzare
it was very
gli
important to
stessi punti
use
di ancoraggio che
the
erano stati
biancoraggio points,
utilizzati
which the same ones which
nella fase
had
di
been
realizzazione
previously
iniziale
used during
del cassettonato, e per rispettare
the
il più
creation
possibile
of the
anche,
ceiling,
diciamo,
of the
con
comfort
il
ceiling,
risultato
to try
estetico
to
finale e quindi
comply
non
or
far
with
vedere
the
dal
final
basso,
result in order
questi ancoraggi
not
che
to
ovviamente
show
sono
the
ancora
anchor
importanti
points
perché
from
considerate
below,
questi
to
sono
hide them.
elementi che hanno un
Now,
peso
those anchor
notevole.
points are very important because, of course, all of the
Questo è il
structure is
risultato
rather
finale
heavy.
che avete
So
già
that said,
visto
this
anche
is
in
the
altre
final
immagini.
result that you've already seen in other
Accenno soltanto
images. Just
agli
one,
interventi
like
che hanno
just
seguito
to say
il
something
restauro
about
del cassettonato,
the
che sono stati
interventions that
interventi
took
sulle
place
pareti,
after
sulla
the restoration of the
la zona absidale non era
coffered
stata
ceiling.
interessata
The
direttamente
apse
da
and the walls. Now, the apse
ma le
itself
pareti
was
invece avevano
not interested
subito
by
alcuni
the
danni,
collapse,
soprattutto
but
delle
the
porzioni in argento,
walls
decorati
were damaged, especially
e
as to
poi
some
ovviamente
decorations in stucco, etc.
un danno importante
And
era
then
stato fatto
also
nella pavimentazione e
the
nell'andare a fare
pavement was
l'intervento
damaged
di ripristino
seriously,
della
and
pavimentazione,
therefore we had to
che è stata tutta
recover it.
smontata e
It was
adesso ci troviamo, diciamo,
dismantled
sulla fase
completely,
ancora
and at the moment, in fact, we are sitting
diciamo,
on
finale di recupero di questa pavimentazione.
on the pavement, which, as
È
you can
emersa
see,
invece
has been completely recovered.
nell'area
And
proprio centrale della
in the
chiesa
central
una
part
serie di
of the
elementi
church, we
di
discovered
interesse archeologico
some
che
elements
sono
that
stati
have an
oggetto di uno
archaeological
studio,
interest,
diciamo,
and which were
approfondimento
subject
di
to
una maggiore conoscenza delle fasi di
digging,
sviluppo della chiesa.
some digging in order to better
L'intervento
understand
è stato un
the history of the
intervento
church.
corale,
We worked neck by neck with everybody. These are just two of the hands that worked in this site, and of course all of this would never have been able if we hadn't been guided by the superintendency and by the director of works. The superintendency, now I'm talking about the one superintendency, but instead there were many superintendencies that were very involved, all of which with their competences. They helped us daily, day after day, hour after hour, and thanks to them we were able to achieve these results in such a brief period of time. In Christmas, by Christmas we were ready with the ceiling, and which was substantially over.
Thank you very much, Rossana. We are very close to the end of this day. From the top to the bottom, of course, when something is collapsing from above to the floor. And the floor, as you can see in a wide image, have been affected by the structure, and the ceiling collapsed. Alessandro?
Thank you, Andrea. Now, the damage to the church. So, as we've heard, the ceiling fell in. The many parts of the facade, which have now been almost completely recovered, the comfort ceiling, and then many parts of the ceiling too, of the pavement, sorry, were damaged as well. Now, this is an image that clearly shows what I'm talking about. It refers to exactly this place where I'm talking now in this moment. Now, the area above us is not geometrically extended to the entire part of the church. So this is the image that I'm talking about. So as I was telling you, so this is the part of ceiling that caved in, that fell in due to the caused by the covered elements that fell. Now, this is not a conglomerate, but it was probably something that was created in the first years of the 900, and which was therefore more delicate, not weaker than, and so it completely fell in and crumbled after the collapse of the ceiling, and it was completely reconstructed. Now, in this case, the difficulty was exactly the same of the coffered ceiling. I'd like you to notice that the design of the frames of the pavement are the exact, represent the exact projection of the lacunari of the coffered ceiling, where we have the nativity in the central part. There is a geometric design which represents exactly that area, and there on the left there is the statue of and the Holy Child, and then St. Peter's and Paul on the other side, which are the patrons of Rome. So the difficulty was the following, that we had to dismantle the pavement, and we had to restore them and then place them once more in their precise position. In some cases, we decided that this was not completely possible because the fragments sometimes were too small, and we could not recompose them or compose them while guaranteeing durability and time. There is no design of the area that collapsed, the one that we see on the right part. So in this case, we took the part from the left, and we created a mirror image on the other side with all of the approximations, of course, that pertain to this type of approach. Now, these are some images that show here on the left, the central part. Now here there was an airing grid that allowed passage of air between this hall, the hall of the crucifix, and the hall in the church. And there on the right we have the recomposition of fragments of the part that collapsed, the one that collapsed due to the collapse of the wooden part of the ceiling. Now, these are the various phases in which we dismantled the pavement, and which sometimes created some problems, even in terms of space, because the entire site had to take place here inside. There were no exterior deposits because we wanted the site to be kept as much as possible within the church. Luckily, there is the oratorium that we were able to use as a deposit for the parts that we relating to the pavement. Now, here you can see on the right the work, and in some cases we're up to 1.30 meters of ground that was weighing, and we also found three sepulchres here under the pavements, which were recovered, which were studied, bodies, and which were repositioned in the place where they were found during the consolidation of the area itself. Now, as you can see on the picture there on top, on the left, this is what happened. That referred to the phase before the dismantling, and said on the right, you can see the reconstruction of a portion. There is an iron with the agent to material, light material to reduce the weight. Then on the left, at the bottom, you can see when it was filled up, and there on the right, when it
In
was
verticale
completed. Those
segnano la
tables
fine del
in
solaio più
vertical
moderno, cioè in acciaio e laterizio, e l'inizio della volta, l'estradosso della volta
are placed at the
originaria.
end.
L'intervento
So the
sulla
intervention
volta originaria,
on
come si vede da queste immagini, è stato
part
realizzato
was
con dei frenelli, dei muretti,
created
una
with some
tecnica tradizionale
technique, a
con cui
traditional
si
technique, by
rappresentava e
which
realizzava l'alleggerimento
you could
delle volte, non
lighten
sempre
up
con
the
materiale di
area
arricchimento
and make it less
pesante,
heavy.
ma anche con dei frenelli.
So,
Erano dei muretti trasversali
so
alla
transversal
generatrice delle volte,
walls,
e poi l'orizzontamento,
and
il
then
solaio
with
su cui si
the
camminava. In questo caso abbiamo
horizontal
eliminato
part.
tutto il
So in
terreno
this case,
sciolto,
we were able to
passando da
take all
come dire, dei
away
pesi
all
di circa
of
1600-1800 kg a metro cubo a
ground,
una serie di blocchetti a
reduce the
secco
weight with
di
some
gas beton,
small
accesso
gas
cellulare,
beton
di
blocks
circa 500-600 kg a
of
metro
about
cubo, alleggerendo
500-600
tantissimo il
kilograms
carico sulla
per
volta, dandogli però una
cubic
capacità
meter,
di
reducing
resistenza e di inerzia notevolmente più importante.
burden, but also
Si vede sull'immagine in
increasing
alto a destra
the resistance
quel
and the
fronte
inertia.
durante la
There
realizzazione
on the right,
dei
you can
frenelli, che è
see
circa 1,20 m
1
o
meter
1,30
and a half.
a seconda dei casi, quindi un alleggerimento
So
notevole
we were able to
del peso
lighten
della volta.
the weight
Queste sono alcune
overall by
immagini.
quite
In
a
alto a
lot.
sinistra è
Now there
come dire,
on the
la
left,
bussola di ingresso
you can see
alla chiesa, che è
the
stata
bussola
smontata
at
ed
the
è
entrance of
in fase di
church,
restauro
which
da
was
un falegname ebanista
taken
proprio per
apart and which is under
restaurarla
restoration
e
by an
riportarla
expert
agli
and
splendori originari, come
wood
quella
craftsman,
a
which
destra
and
è
on the
uno degli
right
altari
there
laterali
is
che ha
another
visto
altar
la
which
distruzione della base, come in basso a sinistra una dei due
was
balconate cantorie
damaged, and
che hanno
then
subito dei
on
danni,
the
che è
left
stata
there was a
ricostruita.
balcony which
Questa è
it too
interamente
was damaged and which was
in legno.
completely reconstructed entirely in
Un'altra
wood.
accortezza che abbiamo voluto introdurre in questo
Another
progetto è fare
thing
in
that we
modo
wanted to
tale
introduce in
che il
this
sistema di
project
illuminazione
is
sia
that
parte
we wanted the
integrante
illumination, the
del
lighting, to be
restauro.
a piece and parcel of the
Prima del
restoration
crollo,
itself. Before
vi era una serie di
the
luci anche a LED,
collapse, there were
ma
some
molto forti,
LED
non
lights,
c'era stato un
LED
progetto
lights,
per
however,
questo
very strong,
caso.
and they were placed, however, not according to a very specific project. So we decided to do something different. We carried out a lighting study, and we wanted the illumination of the coffered ceiling and of the figures that were presented over the frame had a softer lighting, as sometimes it had in the past when candles were used. So we wanted to create some also ambiance in trying to perceive, yes, the coffered ceiling restored, but lighted in that way. So these are some tests that we carried out a couple of days, some time ago, with some samples to try to verify the warmth of the light and the system of juxtaposition of the spot lights that can reduce the shadows which normally otherwise would be present in these cases. Now, these are some phases that date back to some weeks ago, where the lapidary elements are reproposed, and the central one that I was talking about before. And this is the grid and the reconstruction of the lateral parts. Now, I would very much like to end my speech with the participation of Professor Carbonara Scarpitti and Dr. Gabrielli. I would like to call them all here to the table, because truly what we were able to achieve was only possible through the work of everybody. So kindly, if you can come here.
un'immagine, quasi una fotografia, ma per
That's
rappresentare che
a group photo, a
sono
group
le
picture,
competenze di tutte
to
le
show that
persone
it was only thanks to the
sono state
competences
qui,
of so many
che
experts that we
fatto in
were
modo tale che
really
ci fosse,
able
come dire, che si
to
conseguisse un intervento così speciale. Quindi,
achieve
come dire, ringrazio
the objective that we have
tutti
been
voi
set
perché
before.
siete in
No, so
presenza,
I'd like to thank
così
you very
come
much
anche
for coming
il Vicariato
in
di Roma
person.
per
I'd
la
like to
gestione
thank the
amministrativa,
Vicariato of
che
Rome
ha
for
avuto
the
la
administrative
delicatezza e la
management and
sensibilità di
who was so
tenere il cantiere sempre aperto,
who helped us very much in keeping the site open and allowing it also to be visited. So I thank you very much for your attention and for having visited this site that I must say we are very, very proud of.
So thank you very much, Alessandro. Thank you, Professor Carbonara. Thank you, Paolo Scarpelliti, Rossana Gabrielli, for this intervention. Please, if you can take a seat. I know that from the Board of Direction that we have a lot of questions. Alessandro, stay please with me to close and the final conclusion of this first part of the Restoration Week. Sonia, from the Board of Directors, I know that we have a lot of questions from and notes, mainly from the chat by the foreign experts.
It arrived several questions for the expert here. The first one is from Dimitri for the designer Bozzetti, the engineer. The question is, how long did it take for 1. Preparation of the documentation, 2. The work itself?
Allora, tutta la
So the
fase che
entire phase
interessate
involving the magistracy
delle cause
for
del dissesto ci ha lasciati
the
liberi
settlement of
di
the
acquisire
proceedings
moltissime
allowed us to
informazioni.
collect a lot of information.
Già dai primi
So as from
momenti dopo il crollo,
the
siamo
first
stati qui
moments
presenti ad
after the
acquisire
collapse, we were
informazioni
here
e
to collect
archiviarle,
information, to catalog
rendere,
information,
metodica
and
l'informazione.
also
Poi abbiamo utilizzato
it was possible
per
then
poter
to
realizzare
use
il
such
progetto
information
insieme a tutte
to
le figure che
develop the
in
project.
sono state qui, ma anche a tutte le altre che non
And
sono
some
qui, ma
of
che
the
hanno
colleagues
partecipato
involved were
alla
here,
realizzazione di
some
questo.
other
Come vi
colleagues
accennavo
worked remotely,
prima,
but in any
esiste
case, and as I
un
said
modello
before, there's
Building
a
Information Modeling
specific
che dovrebbe
historic building
racchiudere
information
tutte le
monitoring,
informazioni sul
HBIM,
cassettonato
that collects
vero e proprio,
information
così come è
on
stato
the coffered
realizzato
ceiling, as it
dal
was
Vicariato,
for
un sito
instance,
internet accessibile, San Giuseppe dei Falegnami,
constructed, and also the church has a website that includes the story of the site, of the restoration site, and also, well, up to 1 week ago. And there's also a specialized magazine which is available online and which includes a number of in-depth analysis relating to the contents of this restoration site. So we were lucky because in this case we had the scanner laser and the high definition images, and also because it was possible also thanks to the ecclesial representatives that helped us in collecting this information and to put them to the service of restoration.
Sonia, some other questions?
There is a second question for the Professor Carbonara. Given to your great experience, have you ever faced a project that can be related to this kind of complexity?
This is a very complex site because it includes a lot of problems. Historical problems, interpretation problems, legal problems, and structural problems, problems linked to materials which are complex, like, for instance, the wood of the truss and also the marbles. So other examples, we have many other examples, but not too many. For instance, in Milan, which is the Saint Sepulchre that was restored a while ago, and the process adopted was the same, that is to say, the historical understanding building, and also the respect for the construction, and also the respect for the images, the way in which the object is presented, because the object is an element of restoration in itself. And also, for instance, there are other sites, others, for instance, in Rome, that come from the collaboration between universities and Ministry of Cultural Heritage and organizations. So the mixing of competencies and knowledge and know-how generally leads to good results, especially when you have a good, let's say, coordination room. Let's put it this way. Not too many examples, but we do have some.
Sonia, we are running out of time, but last question.
Yes, there is a third question for the restoration company, for Rossana Gabrielli. Okay, the question is, rapidity and accuracy, how can you reach these beautiful results?
Well, it was possible for us because we had the chance to think and organize the approach we wanted to adopt before acting. So you have to think to act well, so you have to be organized. You have to get organized well, so the 4 phases and the different teams that worked, and also the multidisciplinary approach, the fact of having different figures that interacted, and the fact of being constantly monitored and supported by the different institutions. We had daily meetings, for instance, and we immediately got the answers to the questions we had. And then the passion, of course, the commitment of all of the people that worked, and also those that really did so much for this restoration work.
Very much. This is really a restoration work site of the records. This timing is almost impossible in Italy, but I think all over the world. Probably if you have to think about this reconstruction, probably the average time is 7-10 years. So in less than 2, the team have been able to get this result. The owner, Vescovado, have been able to coordinate a team of professionals, which is very, very important. We are very close to the end. Alessandro, please come on the stage to help me for the conclusion. We are closing not the Restoration Week, but this first part of the Restoration Week on site. Tomorrow morning we have a more institutional part, the most institutional part of the Restoration Week. Roberto, we will be at the Italian Trade Agency with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the final conference, the institutional one. We are just summarize the experience that we have lived together during these first 4 days. So thank you to the board of directors, Alessandro Vernoli as director, and representatives of Smart Factory and all the team, the cameramen. Thank you very much to the delegate in presence for your patience. It has been a little bit difficult, as you can see from the main screen. If you can come back to the wide image just for a while. No, the other one. This is the set, this is the church. It is a work site, so it is another effect of complexity. Alessandro, as president of Asso Restauro, this time it has been very hard. We are organizing the Restoration Week or the workshop for restoration since 2006, so we can say that we are experts in that, but this time it was very hard. Tomorrow we are called to a summary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, just to say a final.
Well, simply by putting aside my role in this afternoon, I would like to say that this week has been definitely interesting. We've seen a lot of examples in terms of restoration, and tomorrow we're going to take stock of what we've seen and what we've done. And I believe that this week has been definitely fruitful and also full of exchanges of views and cultural sharing of information. So we are really satisfied also for the support we've received and for the organization of this week by ICE that allowed us to participate and to provide our contribution to the restoration, which is now part of Made in Italy. So we are proud to contribute to the Made in Italy. And to
okay.
do
Thank
the
you very
best
much.
we can.
See you
Okay,
tomorrow.
thank you.
Sonia for the technical meetings in Zoom. Thank you very much to all of you. See you tomorrow.
We hope you enjoy this visit. For the registered user, today we will deepen this topic with the thematic of restoration and preservation of decorative surface and design and intervention on building reconstruction. So if you click in the link below here, the Zoom link, you can follow right now in a few minutes the thematic roundtable when you can meet the Italian expert of these topics. So see you there, and for the other, see you tomorrow. Bye. Thank you.